Hello, and welcome back to Jade's Tabletop Tavern, home of Gatekeepers. If you enjoy tonight's content, please make sure to hit that like button, as it lets us know that we are, providing you with material or commentary that you're enjoying. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to the channels here and listed in the video description. After the show has concluded, I'll make sure to get those channels listed. If you're not already a member of our Discord, please consider joining our Discord, as there you can join with other game masters and players to pose questions to the Gatekeeper community and to our general discussion or even suggestion box for future topics to cover. Without further ado, get into it, shall we? Hello, my name's Jade, and this is, well, my Tabletop Tavern. It's still a little Christmassy themed right now because, well, the holiday was just yesterday. So, yeah, joining me tonight is going to be Shadow of Shadow and Sun. Welcome, sir.
Howdy, folks.
And MarHawkman. Welcome.
Good evening.
So tonight our topic is, well, ask us anything gaming. For our gatekeepers out there, you know who you are. The link is available to you in our Discord. For our masters at the table, the link is also available to you. So anyone who would like to hop on may do so. I'll add you to the stream. So, tonight I kind of want to focus on, some of the things or topics we talked about earlier in the year, and either we didn't like the topic enough, or that we don't think we expounded enough upon the topic. But I also want to have the audience, be able to participate and ask us quite literally any question related to gaming that they may or may not have. And we've gotten a few. Mac Thompson, I think, had posted in our Discord, and then I believe Elle actually posted on my original community post on YouTube with questions, and I would love to get to those. There seems to be a problem with audio. I will check my settings. My settings look like, yep, I am definitely low. I will boost that for you, Elle. Go into my OBS settings to boost my audio. How about now? Can you hear me better out there?
Yeah, you sound fine.
Fantastic. So, and what's with all the MTV style intros? I don't know. I was an 80s kid.
I mean, if you think it looks cool, why not?
Yeah, I mean, I could just have the boring, just the countdown and then directly into it. But, figured I'd spice things up just a little bit.
I can't say anything. I mean, you guys have seen my show. It's the least professional show out there. And we're not going to be changing that anytime soon, even with the new year.
Okay. I don't know. I always pride myself on perfectionism. That's just kind of who I've always been. I've been always a perfectionist. So when I set out to do this, I'm like, yeah, I want crisp sounding audio. I want, decent video material. That's just one of the things I wanted to go for. I'm like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it right. Worth doing. It's worth doing right.
Well, we did get a new camera.
Oh yeah.
But I forget the brand, but it's actually got night vision capabilities on it as well. So who knows? Maybe you'll get some UFO videos from us. I live like 15 minutes away from Skunk Works, so there's all kinds of crazy stuff in the skies. But I'm sure that's just new tech versus alien tech.
Sure. Fair enough, Al. So, our first question tonight actually comes from Mac. Oh, I think I'm saying that right. Gosh. Question. There we go. So Mac actually writes to us on our Discord, asking, he's only recently started watching our content, and thank you for doing so. But have we ever discussed modern style RPGs? And this can be anything from urban fantasy horror like Buffy, Dresden Files, or even like superheroes, Lovecraft, Spycraft, or X-Files style games. Have we discussed any of that? I don't think we have.
I'm actually going to be doing a deep dive on first and second edition Top Secret for the next couple of months, getting it out of my system. I got this sudden urge to do spies and things like that. There's a couple of decent games out there. Victor's game, I think, deals with that. It's kind of funny because I always wonder why sci-fi and modern and superheroes aren't more popular when they're closer to our own frames of reference. We live in a modern world. We watch James Bond, and even going back to like Get Smart and The Man from Uncle and things like that. Those things were widely popular during their time, but they just sort of flounder as RPGs. They're like sort of a kind of not necessarily a one shot thing, but most people just don't get into it, and that just blows my mind. We all can relate to being a spy or an action hero far more than we can being a wizard or an elf or a dwarf or a barbarian. We're not those things.
There aren't those things. Aspect of this that caught my attention years back that I was pondering, and that is, how the thing with Buffy the Vampire Slayer was going around in the 90s, and then you had the Underworld movies.
Sure.
How much did that actually influence the TTRPG scene?
Very little, almost non-existent as far as I could tell.
I don't know. I think it depends on who you ask and what games they were playing at the time. Because I remember playing Vampire the Masquerade with a group in was it Southern Illinois, and they were pretty influenced by Buffy, not so much by the spinoff Angel, but they and it was good material to have a point of reference for.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I was specifically thinking of, though, is the whole like Underworld thing. It's like I know people who did have inspiration from Underworld when playing World of Darkness stuff.
Yep.
It's just that World of Darkness isn't really well written for the whole vampires versus werewolves thing.
That's an accurate statement. The mixing of the different worlds of darkness settings. Before, I think, what edition was that? I think in third edition of the rule sets. It got messy. Things didn't translate well. The different rules were a little too powerful in other systems. Like, I think True Believer was one of the things that almost every storyteller for World of Darkness would never allow at any setting.
I mean, I've kind of sort of played with the system a little bit, but not enough to be able to say I actually understand it.
I played quite a bit of this of World of Darkness and Vampire the Masquerade, and I'm not going to say I'm a master of it. I could definitely story tell for it,
Mm.
but I'm not an aficionado on the rules.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I was in one campaign like almost 25 years ago now,
mm.
and after I left that location, I just never actually went back to it.
So I think the reason why I typically don't stray too far into the modern settings of RPGs is it's almost too relatable to current life,
Mm,
or at least the ones that I have are almost too relatable to current life. I mean, yeah, sure, everybody will get the references. Everybody gets the knowledge of, oh yeah, that that's a smartphone, not a data tab or a data slate like Star Trek used to call them. No, no, it's just a smartphone now. Um,
mhm.
and ray guns and pistols and the different types of ammunition types.
To be honest,
It's
though,
just
like with ray guns, that's actually one of those things that's like old school pop sci-fi. Like, I mean, like
mhm.
you see it parodied in the Jetsons, even.
Mhm.
It's
Buck
it's
Rogers, Flash Gordon,
oh yeah, all that
sort
stuff.
of thing.
And it's just one of those things I find to be kind of weird. It's like okay, so which TTRPGs play with that? Hmm.
and I think L has a point here, because this is something I've noticed as well, especially with some of the crowd who is focused on like the superheroes or the supernatural type settings. Players are wanting to play like that Sam and Dean Winchester style game, or they're wanting to play characters from the silver screen or the big screen. Um, or like, I mean, even I wanted to play a character like Aragorn, like Strider, but I had read the books first before the movie came out, and that's what inspired me with Tolkien. And you even state here, El, that older players play more characters that are based on books and less cinematic. I think that might be a part of the reason why I do stay away from modern games. Is it feels too close to our own reality. It feels too close to the silver screen, and honestly, Hollywood does it a lot better than I can do in the storytelling aspect or the plot aspects of it. I don't have the budget for the special effects. I don't have the budget for like the TV screen table. So that people can set their minis on and have like explosions happen on the screen or moving pictures. Um, I'm an old school like hand draw it on the table or hand draw it on paper or whatnot, lay it out, and let my players explore the region I've got. But even then, I go theater of the mind quite a bit too because I don't have everything drawn, I don't have everything prepped, and what happens up here can be far more stunning or visually appealing in the mind's eye than even what I can draw on paper because I'm not a great artist. I'm
Well,
I'm a
and in my groups,
craftsman, not
whenever
an
we've
artist.
used maps, we would go with something that's a representational map and not try
Mhm.
to make it a perfect war game style grid where you need to measure your position to within a quarter of an inch in order to ensure that you get your weapon ranges right. Nah, no, no, no. We just did not bother with that. We just wanted something else so that you can remember. It's like, okay, we're in the room. Approximately how big is the room? Okay, which side of the room am I standing on? And that's about as far as we cared. Mhm.
Right.
That's what's weird. Back in the day when I was playing, like for example, Top Secret, it was really easy to come up with dossiers and missions by just going through like People magazine and cutting out images, and then
Mm.
taping them to a piece of paper or something like that. Didn't have access to color printers because I don't even know if they existed for normal folk, outside of.
Well, I mean, it was one of those things would cost you like
Yeah.
$5 just to buy ink cartridges, and
Mhm.
well,
And we in a way we had it easier because we didn't have the competition with great video game graphics. Sure, movies, but you watch the movie 2 hours later and you kind of want to play the game now. Now we've got so much competition with great 3D terrain, virtual tabletops, video games that have phenomenal graphics.
And then you have stuff like Baldur's Gate, where the devs of that went out of their way to make the game as complicated as possible in terms of how you could complete story objectives.
Yeah.
I mean, because like they actually went and had people play test the game and looked at whatever weird batshit the people play testing the game came up with, and decided whether they wanted to incorporate that as a possible alternate path to solving the quest.
I mean, and in a lot of ways, game mastery is like that, where you're in your own mind might have an idea of what the solution could be, of how the players could approach a thing, but then the players approach it completely differently than you could have ever imagined possible. How did you get to that point there from all the information that was leading you quite literally somewhere else? um and yeah, I've had that happen at my table all the time, where I give my players the information they need to be able to move on and start putting things together. Who did what, and where and why, the motives, and so on and so forth, and then they completely circumnavigate a huge section that I had prepped for. I'm like, oh, well, don't need that anymore.
Yeah,
And
well, one of the Baldur's Gate examples, one out of a long list, mind you, was there's a scene where this gnome is threatening to kill a bunch of people by blowing up this giant keg of gunpowder. And the normal way of completing this step is to do a dialogue thing where you try to talk her out of it or something. Well, one thing people figured out is that you could use magic to just steal the barrel.
but sure, like the video game industry has definitely gone pretty far, with making your choices seem like they matter, or making your choices matter for that moment, big or small. But I don't think they'll ever truly capture the table experience of
And there's always
Absolutely
going to
not.
be a
Well, I mean,
limitation on the number of possible things you can program.
you maybe in the future it will when we're all plugged in, but I think El nailed it. I know so many people who have literally no imagination. They literally can't, and I'm not even talking about in the gaming aspect, but they can't picture real world possibilities. What's going to happen in the future. What someone else might be feeling, how to empathize with other folks. They're just the every aspect of imagination has been, sucked out of a huge chunk of the population. And I don't mean, just one group or one age group or anything like that, but it's less and less possible, it seems, for so many people to just, think outside the box.
Well,
You
as
know,
one person put it to me, it seems to be a consequence of exercising your imagination. If you just don't practice it and just look at things and don't try to imagine them yourself, you just don't develop the ability.
Well, and I think that's where science fiction games might go awry, is because it's been done on the silver screen so often. Like,
Mhm.
that's what has pervaded our cinema experience for the last at least 15 years, is a bunch of urban settings, a bunch of not necessarily urban fantasy, but definitely urban mystery, urban horror. And I mean, it's pervaded our televisions, our movies, even some of our video games. So when a game master is like, "Hey, I want to, I want to explore an urban content or urban style game," you're left with like, okay, well, now how do I hook my players that hasn't already been done by Hollywood or by AAA games or whatever? Like, how do I hook them and get them interested in my urban setting?
I
Do
mean,
I
like,
go with a well, I mean, do I go with like a World War III, or even demonic cults, taking over the different um, nations or whatnot, or do I
one
go
one
with like alien invasion?
one cinematic IP that I think would be interesting to try to make a proper TTRPG for is, the Night Watch and Day Watch, setting, because of the fact that it has one of the most bonkers, over the top approaches towards handling magic in universe that I have ever seen. But also, at the same time, is very, um, real world adjacent and modern in how it does it. Like, it's one of those things where it'll do weird things, like having a cell phone that's pushed outside normal three-dimensional space with magic to hide it. But someone who knows how, the right spell can just like pluck it out of the air and then use it. Weird stuff like that.
Hmm. Now, Mac also lists like 6 different plot hooks that you could use for a more urban setting. Um, like again, the World War III, the Illuminati territory, alien invasions, AI takeover, Atlantis being not only real and existing but also in control of the oceans. The end times, so on and so forth. Like, and a lot of those are actually really great, like
He
starting
clearly
points.
he's been paying attention to my prepper videos uh, and the quantum show with Nathan Allen. We've been covering a lot of those ideas, and I'm actually hoping to use them in a couple of different games I'm going to be running next year, because I am getting kind of burnt on the fantasy stuff. I've done so
Mm,
much of it, and I want to, with Connell's show, we're going to do sci-fi for the whole year. Sci-fi fantasy,
Well, I
sci-fi,
mean,
sci-fi.
that's also part of the reason why on my YouTube channel, I've been doing those lore, investigations, for the Star Trek episodes. It's because the fact that people are like, "Oh, yeah, I've seen Star Trek a few times." But watching an episode once and then trying to remember all of the plot details 10 years later, good luck with that. It's especially interesting when it's plot details that get mentioned only in that one episode, not mentioned again. That's one of the things that I find the most interesting to look at when I'm doing these videos is like, what could you do with this as a game master in a TTRPG? Because this is something that they brought up as a major plot point, didn't explain, and never touched it ever again.
mhm,
Like, well, one example is the Edo Guardian. We don't know what it was. They did not explain in the episode whether it was actually an AI or just some sort of weird space station. All that actually said about it was that it wasn't something that existed in three-dimensional space.
mm,
Its method of communication could be interpreted as someone pushing buttons to make the space station do things. We don't actually know.
huh.
And that's something
Now,
you could have a lot of fun with as a GM.
yeah, I mean, as far as like sci-fi settings go, or even modern urban settings go, like there are definitely ways to and resources you can draw upon, generate some ideas on what to do. Like I had a like a more like World War II ish setting that I was running. It was called the was Two Worlds, One Home, and the 10-Year War campaign. And I had actually gone through and I'd made all my own firearm weapons, for players to use and explore, and based on the country they were supporting or from even, and it went over fairly well. Unfortunately, both games fell apart because players just weren't available anymore. So, um, but I was using D&D 3.0 or 3.x rules set because that's just what I had available to me at the time without spending judicious amounts of money that I did not have, because I'd already spent it on the books I had, and I was a poor college student at the time. So, but no, we explored a world at war um, type game, and like I said, it went over fairly well, and some of my players liked it. Some of them they didn't really care for it much, but it. I learned my lessons from it, and I moved on to other settings.
I mean, there's a
Unfortunately,
lot of ways you can write wars in fiction, though. I mean, you could do
sure.
Tolkien style elves and men versus orcs kind of stuff, or Star
Well,
Trek
I mean,
style stuff where it's the Cardassians and the Federation going at it.
right, and that is kind of where I'm at is back to Tolkien, because that's kind of where I'm at with my own like love of science fiction, or actually in this case, fantasy. Um, is I like medieval style fantasy or even ancient style fantasy. I'm not
Yeah, well,
really into the modern settings, or
yeah,
even ultra science fiction settings.
one thing that I personally find to be rather interesting, and that is something that I personally suspect is actually partially intentional, is I think part of the reason why there are so few of the old school pop culture sci-fi fantasy things that are actually being pushed as TTRPGs is because of the fact that for the most part the movie industry doesn't go there anymore. Cuz
Yeah, they sort of went way past it and never looked back.
Mhm.
heavy metal type stuff is that's the way that the old fantastic tales used to be written. Granted, usually with less nudity, but usually
I would go as far back as saying as the Gil Gerard Buck Rogers was the last of it. Maybe the Logan's Run TV show. I don't know which came first or ended first, that sort of thing. But after that, it was all about moving past that in all forms of science fiction. Maybe Outland was a little bit of a look back at the Western mixed in with sci-fi. But
yeah.
after roughly that era, it was all about going forward with the even more high tech, because our technological advances had caught up with a lot of
Well,
the technology in Buck Rogers, Flash Gordon.
there's a
That's
movie series from Full Moon Entertainment that I personally find to be great in terms of being old school pop sci-fi because of the fact that what it was it's kind of sort of a western in space with
Mhm.
aliens.
What was it called?
Oblivion.
Okay, that sounds kind of familiar, but
I
who
mean,
was it?
I think the biggest reason why I don't go sci-fi or even urban is I try to get my players to imagine new characters that don't already exist. And I say that because one of well, I have one player in particular. No matter what the game is, I can always count on him to play one kind of character, and it's a comic book character. He always plays Hawkeye.
Okay.
When given the choice of playing, Hawkeye or quite literally anything else, he always chooses Hawkeye. He always chooses that kind of character. And you know what? That's him. That's what he knows. Write what you know. Sure, I get that, and I
Right.
support that. Play what you know.
I think we've all had players like that. That they had their. I think it goes back to though comic books in a lot of ways, because for many people, comic books were the most accessible science fiction and or fantasy that we could get a hold of at a moment's notice. We didn't have to wait for it to come on TV. You had 10 cents, 25 cents. You went down to the liquor store or the malt shop or whatever you had in your area, and you could grab, a comic book from any number of lines of comic books, and boom. Nice, L. And you could just pick something up and just boom, you're in that story. And a lot of us would reread the same comic book several times in the course of a month, waiting for the next issue. And a lot of times we'd buy something else instead of the next issue because the time had gone by. And going back, so we had to jump around a lot. But it was going back to our friend who does that, or friends who do that, that could have been because that's what they had, and that was their first, the first thing that imprinted on them. Growing up as a real small child, I see that with my son doing the same kind of things with the characters that he has become familiar with through different mediums, of course, because I don't let him touch my damn comic books. Or at least I didn't. Oh my god!
And I mean, like I said,
it's very easy for them. But then when it comes to playing a game, there really weren't a lot of. There was Conan, there was Khazar, Kull, Red Sonja, maybe a few others as time went by. But for a huge amount of time, there weren't a lot of fantasy comic books. There just really wasn't. There was so much science fiction or science fantasy or superheroes, even weird war tales, and everything that was more or less closer to modern. Even if it was 100 years ago, that's far closer than the Middle Ages. I don't know what the magical draw is to the Middle Ages, especially considering most of these people didn't read things like Robin Hood. A lot of them never read Tolkien or Conan or any of the greats, but yet they somehow have absorbed all the information. Gru was another one. They absorbed
I think it's
somehow
the movie industry.
But there haven't been that many movies.
Robin Hood,
fantasy.
Even if there haven't been, like yearly Robin Hood movies made, certain Robin Hood movies are among the most popular ever aired on television.
Right. But even then, with Robin Hood, you can't like chalk that up to the modern audience unless they saw one of the I guess a Robin Hood movie. But that doesn't really. Those kind of movies are. I don't see
is
them,
the magic draw.
Right. I don't see them as being that engrossing compared to Tolkien.
Right, or how many people are there in the US who haven't at least heard of Robin Hood?
You'd be surprised with the younger generations, no clue. If they're under 20, there's a good chance they've never heard of him, or they've heard of him, but they can't even like draw you a picture or describe.
Or they'll draw you a fox.
Well, I mean, that was
version.
One of the most popular versions of Robin Hood, though.
It was.
Is it the one where he was drawn as a fox and all that stuff?
That was literally the first movie I saw in the theater, and I've got two different versions of Robin Hood by two different people that are almost identical. So for me, I get it, but with 24-year-olds and younger, let's say, even if they saw that like the Kevin Costner or that type where he wasn't dressed all in green, that sort of Earl Flynn type of
Robin Hood Men in Tights is still one of those things that gets quoted in memes even today. However many
but what age group though? I don't know anybody in their 20s that ever saw it.
Yeah, it's definitely my age group.
And even then, would that be enough to really want to draw you into fantasy versus seeing like Mission Impossible or even any of the new Bond movies? When you tell a player, yeah, you could be, James Bond or a super spy, you get the cool car and, the cool clothes and, a license to kill. Okay, I'm in. Who's going to run that game? I want to be in that game. telling me, you're going to, live in the Middle Ages without running water, blah blah blah. Oh yeah, there's magic, but it's going to be super hard to get any. Telling the truth. Your magic users are going to struggle just to be able to cast a couple of spells a day, and then they're pooped, and they're more or less useless for the rest of the game. Telling it like it really plays out.
Depending on the
Doesn't
game.
you know what I mean? I wouldn't be attracted to that. Tell me I could be a mutant with superpowers and I can fly and do all that stuff. Yeah, sign me up. That I could get into. That I
Well,
can,
I think
relate to.
I think the appeal for at least for me in fantasy genre and over the more modern types of games or even urban games is the limitless potential with not just with magic but with the character itself. Like the roads aren't paved, the lines of the map aren't fully filled in many cases during for medieval fantasy. The edges of the maps are continuing to grow because they don't know what's out there. The map hasn't been fully explored yet.
You
In a
could
more modern setting or even a futuristic setting, you can map the world in a single day with satellites. You can
right
One of the things
the lay of the land.
with
that's
sci-fi, like Mar would agree. You could just say, you're on the frontier of space, and every world's brand new. That they haven't been mapped. You don't know what's there, but you've
yeah, that
got
that was actually a big thing with the Oblivion, is that it was a frontier world that hadn't been had every inch of it explored yet. It was a outpost colony because of the fact that it was just that far off in the deep backwaters of space. And also that's part of the reason why only some of the people were human, is because you're that far from Earth that a whole bunch of people who aren't human show up.
And I think actually Elle says it here. You have two major camps when it comes to fantasy gaming. That's the Vernians and the Tolkienites.
what's a
And I
Vernian?
like the who? What?
What's a Vernian?
Jules Verne?
Jules Verne.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Jules Verne. And I like to say I sit comfortably between the two, Verne and Tolkien, because the first books I read as a young individual were Jules Verne. It was Jules Verne and H.G. Wells were my two first, novels that I read. I had read The Time Machine, 2000 Leagues Under the Sea.
I got in trouble for that book.
I mean, I really enjoyed both those authors as a young individual, and then when I finally read Tolkien, that cemented in me the concept of blending, the steampunk or even Victorian eras and high fantasy and magical fantasy together, and that's kind of where my game setting has always been, and that's the game world I've always run is that like twilight between the old world and the new coming world of steam power and technology. That's typically the era that I normally run. And it's just around the turn of the century for like the 1900s, our time frame, as far as technological advancement, as far as um, you know where they're going next with the edges of the map. Like the frontier is getting filled in, and they're sending people out to explore areas of the world that haven't been mapped. Um, but they're doing so with the advancement of technology, with the advancement of magical technology. So they're blending the two, finding that they don't always mix well together. Through some explosive means sometimes, but otherwise, that's to me, Byrne and Tolkien really got me into fantasy. And I think that's why, because I read it as such a young person, that's why I'm still stuck in fantasy.
See, one thing that's interesting here, though, is that I personally, when I think of Jules Verne, I don't think of him as a fantasy author. It's more like
Okay.
a soft sci-fi sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's like
Well,
to
the
10,000 Leagues Under the Sea, The Time Machine. Those weren't
No,
written as
Time Machine was H.G. Wells, but yeah.
Okay. Well, but it's the same genre of story though. It's like they just they're incredibly fantastical. They go way, way, way beyond the bounds of anything that we can even fantasize about as real technology. Yet,
Well, it wasn't long after we actually had things like Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and
well, I mean,
what was
because
the
like the inspiration for 10,000 Leagues Under the Sea was the fact that submarines were real and people didn't know what was on the bottom of the majority of the ocean.
we
So,
still don't.
um, looking at a fantasy version of that had a, a major draw to it. Also, one thing that occurs to me is that there is actually one major science fiction IP that actually does have a lot of the tropes of the old weird pop culture sci-fi stuff that's like not really hard sci-fi, but just whatever kitchen sink fiction people thought was cool at the time.
Mhm.
Care to guess which IP I'm talking about?
Yeah, yeah, I might know.
Star Wars.
Yeah.
Star Wars has
Uh,
space magic with all the weird force powers. And also it has weird aliens that might possibly be superhuman or
So
maybe
did
not.
Flash Gordon
yeah,
Of course.
yeah.
in a way.
Well,
Look at
Flash
Maggie's ring
Gordon
or
was
whatever.
of a similar time period when it originated. I mean,
Mhm.
it's older than Star Wars, but you know, it's just that Star Wars is one of the few major film series using those tropes that they still kind of sort of at least try to do it that way still.
So, um, now as far as other questions that we have, because I would like to get to other some of your questions out there in the audience. Ask away. We'll try to answer anything gaming related. Um, Now, L posted this on YouTube earlier today, and thank you very much for doing so. Why do people want to rush through games to advance levels or gain abilities instead of being part of the game world? I have
Probably
some
because
theories on this.
Probably
Go
because
ahead.
of the ridiculously low level actual chances of survival and what you can do. In your basic fantasy RPG, you're the rat catcher. You're the peasant farmer. God help you if you want to run the paladin or somebody who's supposed to come from a higher station. The GMs of the current sphere out there seem to want to mud sword you to death and revel in your inadequacy, your inability, your poverty, all things like that, when there are 100 RPGs out there where you can start out filthy rich, and that still doesn't suspend the challenge or the mystery or any of the excitement. But these referees who started out in the beginning, who all were forced to play the farm hand, the struggling thief with nary a copper to his name, those kinds of characters. And over the decades, we've played them to freaking death. I've literally played 100 different thieves at first level, okay, and fighters. I'm tired of that. Maybe youngsters in their teens and whatnot, they're ready for that. They've never done it. It's all wide open and brand new and similar to what they are in their own accomplished life. Me, Jade, Mar, you guys have gone out and done things. Serving in the military 4 years puts you above all of the experiences of most first through fourth, fifth level fighters in every fantasy campaign.
And,
You've already
and
done
I'm a
all that stuff.
retired vet. I didn't just do 4 years.
No, I'm just saying on the average. I have
I
no
know,
idea.
but it's like being in for that many years, you do a whole lot more stuff.
Right. And so you yourself can't be considered a first level character unless you were to suddenly take up a brand new, completely alien profession like,
Mhm.
underwater psychic basket weaver. Okay.
Well, one of the things that I've seen with certain TTRPGs is that they don't go with the approach of new characters being neophytes. They go with the idea that a new character is someone who um has training in whatever their actual job is already. Like, well, one example of this of a TTRPG that does that is Star Trek Adventures. It assumes that your characters are low-ranking Starfleet officers, but that means you went through Starfleet Academy and all of the training associated with whatever your branch of service is within Starfleet or whichever empire you're playing for that game.
Well, that's kind of uh, a first level. Let's put it this way: a first level Star Trek character. If you were to take the character and then convert it to your basic fantasy role playing game, would have high levels in things like martial combat, tactics, survival skills, first aid skills. Whereas these primitive societies, you wouldn't even be allowed to study some of those things because that's outside your caste or wheelhouse or family lineage. Learning first aid was only the realm of the lady outside of town, the witch lady. She's the one who does all that. In a science fiction game, a lot of these skills are just common. You don't walk out the door without knowing how to dig a latrine and bind a wound and recognize the weather patterns and all kinds of things that we take for granted. Whereas fantasy characters, they don't get to know but a few things, and they're shoved out the door, expected to suddenly become big damn heroes.
Well, one example from real life, though, is certain of the old school blacksmithing techniques in real life are lost arts because of the fact that only a handful of people ever knew how to do those things. And when those people died, now no one knew how to do them.
I mean, Mac and Elle both said it already. A lot of newer players to the game have only experienced, the gameplay through video games in some cases. If they're brand new to the role playing game or tabletop role playing games, they've experienced video games up to this point because they're prevalent everywhere. Like I'm willing to bet you walk into just about any home in the United States today, and you will find some kind of gaming device, be it on the phone, be it a console or a PC. There's some kind of gaming implement available.
I mean, myself personally,
yeah.
I have spent a lot more time playing games like Diablo 2 or Final Fantasy than I have TCRPGs. So that's actually part of the reason why I don't really like fancy and magic in TTRPGs is because the fact that my brain wants to use MP instead of
fancy and magic is good for the dying earth, older D&D games where that's just the way it is. You want to play the game, that's the way it's going to go. Any game that uses like spell points or something like that makes far more sense. That you I can't tell you how many times in like Dungeons and Dragons at the end of my magic user's day adventuring, he's got a bunch of spells memorized that he has no use for, memorized them anyways, but really could use being able to cast one of his first level spells. But nope, I'm stuck with these second level spells, and it was always second level spells.
And I actually had in a Hyperborea game, a character end up dying because of the fact that I had prepped the wrong spells for that day.
Yep. And like I always equate, memorizing spells to memorizing songs as a musician. Just because I played Stairway to Heaven, once during the day doesn't mean I can't play that song all day long and drive my players nuts by playing Stairway to Heaven over and over again. I didn't forget the song. It's very simple. Am I too tired to play it again is what it should be. Am I too drained of psychic or magical energy? Not, I've only memorized Stairway to Heaven once today, so I only get to play it once. But
yeah,
for some reason,
that's pretty much the logic Final Fantasy uses. It's like, oh, you know how to cast firebolts. Okay, well, this is the resource you need in order to cast firebolts.
Yeah, and now do you have enough mana or magical energy or whatever to do it again? and again and
Right.
again if you so choose. Not up. I'm stuck with detect magic and light when I really need a magic missile spell.
To be
And
honest,
getting back
though,
to the
that's
original
actually
question,
something that I've seen, drastically influence player choices when deciding which spells they want their character to have in the first place. Is because, like, which one are you actually going to be, wanting to have available all the time versus that thing you might use once out of 5 adventures?
and getting back to L's original question though, why do people want to rush through games to advance levels or gain abilities instead of being part of the game world? Um, I think it comes to impatience. Like people want to feel awesome. They want to feel like rock stars. They want to feel like big damn heroes. And one of the ways that many of the TTRPGs currently that offer you the ability to feel like rock stars is advancement of some kind. Like you
Right.
advancing in level is the accomplishment. And this goes to actual game theory, like game design theory, where people will continue to play a game, no matter what kind of game it is, as long as you are feeling rewarded for doings. As
Yeah.
long as you have that continuous cycle of rewarding engagement, you
Yeah.
will continue to play a game. Be it Pac-Man, Joust, Centipede, or Street Fighter, or any of the other more modern games, you feel accomplished when you do something and you see an instantaneous reward for it.
And,
And
also
that
there
is
goes
game theory.
with that whole thing I was mentioning earlier about the spells thing is that you go up a level, now you have more options for spells, and also you can prep more than just 2 spells a day.
Or having the hit points. I think the fact that the players handbooks show you what how far you can go. If back in the old days, they wouldn't. My first DM wouldn't let me look at the player's handbook,
Mhm.
and that's what Gygax actually kind of wanted. Believe it or not, was the players to not know shit. If you know second level is 300 XP away, you're going to do whatever you can to get those
Go
300
boil an
XP.
anthill.
Yeah,
Well, another thing that certain games have actually done, and something that I personally find to be interesting from a game design perspective, is that when you go up a level, you don't necessarily get to choose every single aspect of how your character changes when you go up a level. Like, like, "Oh, roll to find out what new spells you get." Wait, what?
right. That's
And Elle even asks right here. So TRPGs are about are not about having fun, but about constant progression. And yes and no. I will agree to a certain point on that. That it is about progression. At least the more modern games that I've seen, it's about getting loot and becoming powerful, or getting abilities and becoming powerful. But because everybody wants to feel powerful. Like there's nobody on the planet who wants to feel insignificant. Nobody on this planet wants to feel insignificant. So they play characters who become powerful, either over time or through some means. But the game is supposed to be about having fun. Now, how do you have fun versus how does somebody else have fun? Can people who have two different views on what is fun play at the same table? Sometimes the answer is no, can't.
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
if one person's view of fun is advancing in power, advancing in level, advancing in something, is like that continual progression. If that is what that person finds fun, but the other person finds engaging with the world and the story and what the game master has built for them to kind of dig in and play with. If that player has more fun doing that than advancing in level, sometimes those two player types can't sit at the same table. I've had it happen
And,
to me
and
where
sometimes those two
I've
player
had
types
players
are DM and player. How
sometimes.
many DMs insist on the slow progression,
Mhm.
and nobody at the table is digging it.
Well,
If
Right.
this goes back to that thing I said earlier about how
you're
some
fighting a
games
losing
are
battle. You
front loaded in terms of player power. It's like,
exactly. Those are the games we should be looking at more when we're at this point. Games like Traveler that lets you literally choose: do you want to be front loaded, or do you want to, have more of a slow progression? You're the farm boy, you're the Han Solo, or you're the Obi-Wan. All three players can enter the same game and fulfill all of the requirements of a role-playing game and all have fun in their own unique way, but no one is supremely more powerful than the other. They all have their place in the story and in the game. If the mechanics and the rules and of course the story itself will allow for it, there are a lot of games out there that have that sort of life path thing where you can go, I'm just going to do one term, let's call it, in the game to roll up my character, and I'm the the Luke Skywalker farm boy with a couple of skills, and I'm ready to go take on the world. And the other guy's like, yeah, I played that kind of character 1,000 times. I want to play someone with a little bit more experience, but yet they can still, both characters can still grow throughout playing, whether it be through skills or gaining things here and there, without throwing the whole system askew. Heck, even Palladium will allow you to play, a vast, one character's playing the city rat, and the other guy's playing a freaking dragon.
well, I mean,
I
like,
mean,
one very math intensive way of looking at it, but it's a way that I started doing because of the fact that it gives me an actual like value that I can assign to it is like, how much do your character stats go up each time you gain a level? I mean, like in some games that you'll going from level 1 to level 2, you'll literally have your HP double.
Yep.
In some
mhm.
games, it's like goes up a little bit every now and then, and it's just one of those things. It's just I find it to be rather interesting from a game design perspective because the fact that games where you start out as gnats to be squished by high level things tend to be very difficult in the early stages simply because of the fact that everything in the world can kill you. Like one example I've
Um,
mentioned several times previously from Hyperborea is having someone do a critical fumble and accidentally KOing themselves when trying to attack.
That's retarded.
It was one
I
of
mean,
those things where it was a combination of a D12 hitting, 12 at the same time that a D20 hit 0, and it wasn't something that was considered to be normal, and, because it's just, well, okay, roll a D20, and get, uh okay, actually, it's a 1 on a D20, but anyway, to, roll a fumble, roll a 12 when you roll for the fumble, to decide that you're going to accidentally injure yourself, and then roll damage, and roll a high enough damage number to accidentally KO yourself.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen because I saw a video of a guy who shot himself in the head, you know, screwing around. I know it's possible, but from a game designer standpoint, I
It shouldn't be
saw
normal. That
it,
example was memorable because of the fact that it was something like a 1 in 200 chance of happening.
right, but I recently saw um, people roll fumbles and kill themselves in the first time playing a game. Okay, made up a brand new character, rolled a fumble, and they're dead. And they proceeded to, for the most part, not want to play again. I
Yeah,
would
that
not
is
play.
actually something that's someone who's a new player would find to be highly disheartening.
Right,
It's just
and I know
like,
we're all
"Oh,
pros here.
I went into combat. I attempted to attack the enemy. The enemy killed me. Now what?"
No, not even the enemy killed me. I killed myself on accident. I wouldn't put that in a game that without letting on the somewhere like on the cover go like Advanced Dungeons and Dragons put on its cover advanced. Oh, advanced, what does that mean? Oh, it probably means for people who've been playing for a while, not like beginner RPG and you fumble and kill yourself. That's a great way to get people to play and not want to play again. I mean, that's not going to happen with me. I fumble, I kill myself, I'll roll up another character, whatever. It's dumb, but I'll do it. I'm not going to rage quit or even leave the hobby, on my first impression going, yeah, I tried D&D once and I made a character and killed myself the first time I ran into combat. I would just not do that from a marketing standpoint. It just seems like, especially today when there are a lot of people out there who have something easier. You're never going to do that in a video game. You are absolutely never, ever, ever, ever going to kill yourself in a fumble in a video game. Why? Because people would stop playing that game, and that's where the big money is.
Video games. In video Halo? Games, tutorials
I've never seen
most
it happen.
video games
If it
are intentionally designed to make it almost impossible to die in the tutorial.
Exactly.
Have you played Halo?
No, never played Halo.
I killed myself in the very first room in Halo because I did something by mistake. I shot one of the crew members in the opening scenes, and everyone turned on me immediately.
That is I've heard stories of that. In that it is one of those things where you're like, why did they program the game to let you do that in the first place?
Right.
That's amusing on many levels, but you got to admit it's probably not something you're going to find in every game. Most games
that's one of those things that wouldn't come up in a TTRPG because of the fact that unless you have someone who is a consummate murder hobo, they're not going to just shoot a random NPC in the first room they walk into, especially when they're told that this room is, friendly space.
If my player actually said that they wanted to do that, I'd be like, seriously? You understand what we're doing here, right? This isn't, we kind of take this seriously, and you're being, a 12-year-old. Knock it off. Is this, really how you're going to, ruin everybody else's evening by pulling crap like that? It's something I would expect from, my gaming table when I was 13, 14 years old. You're not the DM's going to stop you from doing stupid crap like that with the talk, as opposed to letting you go ahead and do it and ruin everybody's night. Okay, everybody's dead. We've been playing for an hour. Let's take a break and roll up some new characters because Joe is an asshole.
Well, I mean, a lot of video games actually don't have friendly fire, simply for that reason, so that you don't need to have people constantly second guessing whether they're going to accidentally shoot one of their allies.
Well, and getting back to the point of why is there such a rush to get through advancements in games and levels and such, and a lot of it does have to do with video games, as we're discussing. But one of the other things you can do, you can front load the players with levels and with power. You can start them at a later progression point in the game than level 1, level 0, level 2. One of my game masters,
level 3.
One of my favorite game masters actually starts us between level 3 and 5 for almost all of his games. However, the caveat there is that those games run into the 30s, 40s, and sometimes, the 20s, 30s, and 40s of levels in D&D 3.0. And, it's a very long game. It's a 3 to 5 year commitment to be in the game. And the play style is a slow progression. We don't just instantly gain levels. Huh?
I said you're a lucky bastard. Getting that kind of commitment these days is pretty hard.
It's hard. Yeah, it is.
I'm down for it, but and I'm in a couple that are potentially long-term situations, but a lot of people younger than us probably are really not down with that. They can't commit to that. They have no idea what they're going to be doing next month.
Truth be told, we started at level 3 over the summer. I think it was like June, maybe May, that we started this game, and we started level 3. I just now last session was December 16th. Last session was December 16th. We just hit 6th level. So we started at 3. We just gained our 3rd level since the start of the game. That's not a fast progression. And we meet every other week. That's not a very fast progression to me.
Wait, when did you start when did you start
like
playing?
May or so.
Yeah.
And he doesn't actually use the charts in the DMG at all as far as assigning XP values to things. He gives an XP value for the evening. It's like, oh, I think you guys earned 1,000 XP. Okay, cool.
Personally, I find games that are really slow like that to be more fun when you don't start at it.
They are more engaging. It's not just necessarily more fun. It's more engaging because the more you engage with the game master's world and the game master's, idea of what is going on in the world and the problems that the game master has set before you to try to solve, the more you engage, the more the game master is likely to give you as a reward for engaging. When the game master goes, oh yeah, I think you guys earned 300 XP. Well, was there something we missed? Could we have done more? Could we have explored more of the world or engaged with the world better to get a higher reward than we got? Did we get a bunch of loot instead of, experience points? We got a bunch of loot instead of experience points. Hey, we got a reward. That's the instant gratification of do something, get a reward. That's kind of what game theory is. Do something, get a reward. So if we got a bunch of loot, I'm not expecting a lot of experience points. I'm expecting the loot to be fairly decent. Or level appropriate for what we're doing. We might sell a lot of it off because we don't need it. Sure. And
it should be both. I'm used to treasure is also experience points.
And for AD&D or basic edition, like that's very true, and I agree. Like for that method of play, go for it. That's really awesome. But we're playing 3.5. We're playing the WotC 1E rules. So when we get the 300 experience points, it's because we probably got a lot of loot. If we get almost no loot for an evening, we can expect almost 1,000 XP for that night. Now, does that gain us a level? No, not even close. Now that we're level 6, we need 6,000 XP to get to the next level.
Getting XP based on how many storyline decisions you made, and you get XP for talking to people. You could totally do that. So you spend like 3 hours negotiating with a foreign diplomat, and then you get however much XP because of, well, I guess you could put it in the category of role playing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I actually value good role play and engagement with the world and what's going on at the table far more than I do fight scenes or encounters that are combat in nature. If my players have decided, they woke up and decided to fight today, or woke up and chose violence, well, you're going to get the combat XP as per the book. I'm not going to give you extra XP for going and looking for fights. Most of my scenarios, a lot of my scenarios, can be solved through actions other than combat. You want to stop the army from invading? Okay. Well, you have a couple options. You can go talk to them, try to dissuade them from their actions, or make it sound like it would be far more expensive for them to do so than it would be otherwise. You can close the pass by blocking it with boulders and trees and avalanches, whatnot. That's a perfectly reasonable response as well. Or you can set it up so that's an ambush and a narrow pass, and you waylay the hell out of them from above, and they just can't get to you. That's also an acceptable answer, and I will reward better XP for finding ways to not get into heavy, long, drug out combats, because I don't even like them as a game master. I don't like them as a player. I don't like them as a game master. I don't like combats that take more than 2 hours to unfold. Actually, if it goes more than 1 hour with 6 players, man, that's a drag. I'm wondering, like, what am I doing wrong? Like, is there something I can be doing better to expedite some of this faster? And I'm just a fighter basically without feats. I'm a paladin who did not take the magic path. I purposely chose a character type, a paladin type that has no magic because I'm not getting saddled with magic again. The last several characters I've had in that Game Master's games have all been magic characters, and I'm not getting saddled with it this time. So I was like, nope, I want to be a holy knight, but I don't want magic. Which I know sounds very counterintuitive. Whatever, it was my choice. But
it's because you've done it already. Guys like us, we the old thing where if you put 10,000 hours into something, you're an expert. Well, to me, it sounds like you put 10, 20, 30,000 hours into something, and being forced to start out at the same old. It gets really boring after a while. Yeah, sorry, L. If somebody told me that was their play, I'd be like, cool story. Not what I'm looking for. I've done that.
level
I've
10 in
literally
15
done
years.
that. Yeah, I've literally done that before, and
Well, my comment, my only comment for that is so L. This is a question for you. Was the experience at the table that amazing to keep you there 15 years and only get to level 10 in basic? Like, what about that game, kept you coming back every time? And like, what kind of memories do you have of that game that are just that potent and that poignant to you? Like, was that time well spent? And if the answer is yes, that time was well spent, awesome, great. That's what I want to hear. I want people to enjoy TTRPGs or tabletop role playing games because they are making poignant memories and having really great times with friends around the table. Not all sessions are going to go well. Not all games are going to end well for certain players' characters. But you pick up the pieces, you make a new character, you move on. Or you grow as a player. But having going only to level 10 in basic. Now I don't know what the level, like what the cap level is for basic, because again, I only played basic one time for I think 2 hours, and that was it. I never actually got a chance to play further.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know what the level cap is.
But recently, I actually learned something about Zero E that is one of those things where I'm like, wait a second, that's how they used to do things? Because the fact that in that one is like most magical enemies you just couldn't hurt with mundane weapons, but also it's like magical weapons were actually super common, but only +1 magic weapons. However, in the really, really old days, D&D actually used 2d6 for combat resolution and not a d20. And in a 2d6 system, a +1 weapon is a lot more powerful.
Well, it's double. It's about double.
Okay. So level cap for basic was 3rd edition, or was 3rd level for basic edition, which that's interesting to me. Again, I never got a chance to really experience it beyond the one session. But the game master built other levels, which that in itself for a game that capped at level 3. I'm imagining you played this in the 70s, then Al, right?
Well, part of
when it came out.
If he played 10 years, he would still have carried into the 80s.
Yeah. I mean,
At which point,
either way, like
everything else would come out.
Not having like PSR printed material of, oh yeah, this is how you can go to level 10. Not having that material available, having your game master come up with, okay, 81 to 96. Okay. That's awesome.
Wow, really? That's kind of unusual considering what else had come out by
I mean,
81.
what AD&D? AD&D was 80s, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean,
Late
there's
80s,
always
mid
been
late 80s.
people who are
Later
like,
70s.
I could get the new version of D&D, or I could keep using the one that I have and
Mm-hmm.
like.
Which, I mean, you had that happen with the 4.0 crowd. Like, when 4.0 D&D or WotC second edition came out, there were a lot of players going, no, I don't want to switch. I like 3.0 or 3X. I like what I'm doing. So then Paizo's like, hey, a lot of those players really like 3.5. Let's keep publishing in that model. And that's how Paizo got really big, really quick. In the 2000s. They were big before because they were already making was it Dungeon and I think Dragon magazines. So they were already printing for 3.5, and they were just like, well, we'll just continue the rule set and make our own stuff for it. But and so you had that with also AD&D, where you had people playing basic, and then AD&D comes along. They're like, no, we're gonna stick with basic. It's what we know. We're not gonna change. We have what we have. Okay, Holmes was 77. Okay, didn't like it. Had a disastrous deaths. Fair. Okay, Holmes edition. But yeah, I mean, having so you yourself, L, out there, you've experienced a game that took 15 years to play out, and that to me is a rarity. That to me is amazing. That the game played out over 15 years, and you got to level 10, which for a game that only had 3 levels to begin with, that to me is awesome. So good on you, good on your game master for continuing the game that long. That's really awesome.
It's also one of those things
Here.
that's kind of interesting is in the old school campaigns where you would have a character die and then his stuff would get given to a new character because
Mhm.
that player is still in the game,
Ooh.
but that character.
Yeah, that was actually, I've never seen that. You might give it to your family, and either way, you were not getting it back. Um, it was
I
actually viewed
think
as like cheating, not cheating, but a way of gaming the system to bequeath it to your younger brother who you're now going to play. Most GMs would be like, no, you get nothing. You start with nothing, you get nothing, but what the book says a first level character gets, which eliminated so many things. You couldn't count on creating families and things like that. It was all about that helped create the murder hobo. If you died, your stuff was going to be taken by your fellow comrades in the dungeon. They were going to divvy it up over your corpse and not even send you off with a decent farewell, because the GM wasn't going to allow any sort of continuity to like give it to another character or player. It was staying in that immediate group, but you weren't going to get it. Everybody else would take your stuff, but you couldn't bequeath it to your brother, your sister, a cousin. That wasn't going to
Well,
happen.
what I was trying to say was that the option of your character picking that up existed, even if it wasn't necessarily a given that it was going to happen that way.
I
Yeah,
mean,
I
if
don't
you
even.
if you talked about it with your game master to begin with, like, hey, this character is really into family. He's really family oriented. And you also tell the party about it. It's like, hey, when my character dies, you even say it in character, like, when I die, I want you to take my body and bury it. I don't expect my body to make it home, but I expect this family heirloom to make it home to my little sister, my little brother, my whoever is waiting for me at home. you know so I do see that as a potential for the party holding on to items that one of the other characters who recently died, and taking it back to their home and maybe lending it to the new character to use in the meantime, like the stuff that wasn't necessarily to be bequeathed to the next of kin. Like, oh well, we've got a suit of band mail. No one else in the party can use it. The new person, that we just, got on the team, can you use this? Well, yes, I can. I can also use that sword. And no, that sword's going to the rightful owner's home. We're not going to give that to you. Sorry.
Well, I mean, that's kind of what I was getting at, though, is that, a +1 sword that no one else is in the party is currently wanting to use, that
Sure.
sort of thing. The new
Now,
character might end up with that simply because no one else is actually using it.
Conall has a 3-point X question he wants answered. How do you put a force bead on a blunt arrow? You've
Um,
already done so multiple times.
yeah,
Sovereign glue.
yeah. If you're bringing tricks from your previous character, just stop. Because one, your new character does not have that knowledge. Two, there are no beads of force, and three, if you were to find one and put it on a blunted arrow, you would miss, because that would give you a -20.
um, I mean, I've actually had to put my foot down on some things that have come up at my game. Like, oh yeah, I want to put the pearls from a necklace of fireball onto an arrow. I'm like, no, that's not how that magic item works. When you pull a pearl off the chain for necklace of fireballs, it's primed. When it leaves your hands, it's ready to go off at a distance. Or basically a timed event. Like when it leaves your hands, it goes off after a certain time. So, you know, by trying to put it on an arrow, now you could glue all, your arrows to the beads while they're still in the chain, and you could take the move action it would require to pull one of the beads off the chain and let one loose to extend its range. I don't see a need to do that. So, any other gaming related questions out there? While you guys are
Mhm. Oh,
looking up some
I'll
thoughts.
points out that in 3.5, a -20 might still hit the target.
3.5. Well, I that would depend on your level, but yes, it actually could still hit something. Um,
But
you
I
get
guess,
sidetracked.
it's a, well,
Well, sidetracked is I mean, we don't get sidetracked. I don't know what you're talking about. No, not us. Not no, not never.
getting
Um
sidetracked assumes you had a plan.
I mean, the plan tonight is to answer questions from you, the audience. To literally ask us anything gaming. Like, if you've got something going on at your table and you're either stuck on an idea and you want other game master advice, ask away. Or if you're a player at a table going, hey, how would you do this? Like, how could I bring this idea up to my game master, or whatnot, and ask away. Like that's the whole point of Ask Us Anything gaming. However, as a backup, looking back at this year, we had quite a few topics that we covered that were mostly world building in nature. How much Tolkien to use. We had two different omnibuses this year as well. Answered a lot of questions like these. In the omnibus or the Purra bus even, because Purr had loads of questions for us
Mhm.
to answer.
Those were fun questions.
Here the arrow, nerf arrows. Yeah, I'm gonna let you try that one again. I know you like speech to text there, Cigar DM, but it does not love you some days. Upster. Okay. Okay.
Oh, I think
Um.
what he was saying is that the arrow would hit if I shot nerf tip arrows, which are way heavy, and they hit what I aim at. Because of the
Oh.
fact that he's taking something that isn't a standard, hunting arrow and putting
Mhm.
the bead on that so that
Yeah,
the
I would still reduce the weight or still reduce the range capability of it.
Here's the thing, Conall. It would be easier to get in my games, to get a magic user to create special arrowheads for you that do exactly what you're talking about than to take two magic items, put them together in, sort of an improvised fashion without a professional to accomplish what you're talking about. It would be like trying to attach a marble to a regular arrow. No matter what kind of arrow it is,
doable.
It's not going to fly the way you think it is unless you practice.
Yeah.
With hundreds of arrows at the ready for hundreds of hours to get that down. Okay, maybe less time because you're going to say, "Oh, I'm a better archer than that." Yeah, well, you're not your D&D character, so
yeah. I mean, a character who had in fact practiced firing weird off balance arrowheads. Hey, maybe so someone who has 20 hours of practice with marbles glued to arrows would actually be able to hit a target with it. Most people wouldn't though.
I mean, aren't you like kind of done playing archers there, Conall? Think you'd want to branch out?
He's currently in the back room.
Fuming.
Oh. There he goes. Yeah, he hopped out of the back room. Anyway, some of the things we did this year. We covered quite a few various things, mostly about world building this year. And I'm wondering, like, is that something that you out there in YouTube found entertaining or not? Or did you find, or were you inspired by some of the things that we said, during this past year? Or are you wanting us to focus on something else later on for this next year? So here, Mac comes back with a question. How many of you game masters make combat more logical and occasionally ignore stats rules? For example, Storm Giant swings tree-sized club. How many of you would just give out damage?
And then how many of you would give out damage, launch the victim into the air, and then do a bit more damage when they land? A bit is an understatement. It would be catastrophic damage. But it also depends on the game. If we're talking, Heroes Unlimited, a superhero game, depends on who he's hitting. He's hitting Thor. Thor's just going to take it. He hits, Peter Parker. Peter Parker's going to go flying, even as Spider-Man. If it's a bunch of D&D characters, I'm gonna swing and hit like 3 or 4 of them with that one hit, just because it's so gigantic. I'm gonna really look at it. Storm Giant D&D depends on who's in the party, where they're spaced, that sort of thing. If I can, logistically like draw it out on the dry erase board and go, look, this swing is going to cut through you and launch you into so and so. The magic user's going to miss his spell because he's also going flying. And that hobbit that was right next to the wizard might get him too.
To answer this as well, how many of game masters make combat more logical? I love logic. I love physics. And as many times as players will stop telling me or tell me to stop killing cat girls by adding physics and logic in a fantasy game, when magic is not involved, I expect logic and physics to be a thing. I expect that when I kick someone off a 30-foot cliff, they're going to land very awful, and it's going to hurt them vastly. I'm when I send a boulder at someone, hurtling down a hill at 80 mile an hour, I'm expecting a squishy splat when it stops moving or when it hits something. I'm not expecting it to just bounce off somebody and they take like what 5d6 damage at the most. For level 10. Like, no, I'm expecting some bones to be broken. I'm expecting bodies to be shattered upon the ground because a boulder that weighs maybe a ton just hit them head on and they had no chance to move out of the way.
Yeah, they're going to stick to it and roll with it and take more damage as it rolls every couple of seconds.
Well, that's actually one of the things I personally find to be kind of interesting about some game systems, because certain game systems that are heavily story focused, if we want to call it that, will not necessarily have you roll for damage. Just like the game master's like, okay, do you think that this means that the character should die? Yes. Okay, then, bam.
Yeah. So,
but that's because the fact that that's what makes sense from a story perspective. It's like, does it make sense for someone to survive having a 20-ton rock fall on them? That sort of thing.
Late to the show, but showing up anyway. It's Conall the Cigar DM. Welcome.
Good evening.
I had to drive down to Indiana, right outside of Indiana, drop off one of the boys' dads. So I made merry hell to get back up here.
Okay, well,
never or something.
The Mac question. I like logic. Storm Giants. Unless the Storm Giant, which 3.5 had feats, 5th edition has feats. In 5th edition, you don't have to use said feats, but let's say we're using said feats. Let's go in that with logic. I like logic when it comes to gaming to certain aspects. If a Storm Giant hits one person, hits your Paladin, because Paladins need to be hit. Unless he has cleave or a greater cleave, it stops with the Paladin. If he has cleave, there goes the Paladin, the Ranger, whoever is next to him in the swing. Because as much as we'd like to have our Giants have the Arctic Cone to their swing, they don't. So unless they have a mechanic in their stats, such as cleave or great cleave, it's a one-trick pony.
Why wouldn't they have that?
Why
wouldn't you just give it to them? I mean, it's a Storm Giant, for Christ's sake.
Like, if I'm swinging if my Storm Giant's swinging a club, and that club, and this actually came up in an Exalted game once, where my character ripped a tree out of the fucking ground, just literally ripped the tree out because he had the strength to do it. He ripped it out of the ground and he swung with a 20-foot long tree at enemies. I hit everything in a 20-foot arc in front of me because I had the strength to do so. Now, to me, there may not be mechanics in D&D, but you know what? If I'm running a Storm Giant and I've got a 20-foot long club, you better believe I am swinging that thing in an arc to hit as many people as possible. I am going bowling for player characters at that point.
Well, I mean, with some games, they don't have that as less simple as just hit or don't hit, but hit and then decide how much damage it does based on whether you have a damage mitigation ability.
Oh, Paizo had a rule for it.
It's called cleave.
No, it's not even called cleave. The Paizo had a rule for a monster called the 100-handed one, or Hecaton Carries, and it swings in an arc. If I roll above a certain amount, or actually it was more like a save. I think it was either a dex save or a con save or something. Whatever was rolled in an arc in front of it, everything gets hit. Because it was 100 swings of swords. It wasn't just one sword. It was 100 different swords coming at them at once.
It slices, it dices. It's a blender from a Greek mythology.
Right. So I would almost rule that the same way for a Storm Giant swinging a 20-foot club. It would hit an arc in front of them, and I'm rolling a set number. Players get a chance to roll defense against that number to dodge out of the way. Now, if they make it, awesome. They take no damage. or they might take minimal damage.
So
If
that'd be
they
a
miss, they're taking all of it.
I understand what you're saying, and I'm not the fact that I'm disagreeing with what you're saying, but games have rules. And
Yeah, sure.
depending on what system that you are running, from blah blah to ooh wee, you have to somewhat stay in the constant.
And this is why I left 3.5.
Well, I know,
I don't agree
get
with it.
that. I like the rules. I don't mind bending said rules. But when you are playing with new players, keeping them somewhat in a box, not box, but in a
keeping to rules as written for brand new players is key to them understanding the core concepts of a game. I agree with that. The rules as written for brand new players. It's great. It's tried and true. It gets butts in the seats and it gets people playing. Once they start getting bored with rules as written, that's when you start going down the paths of homebrewed content or minor rules changes, not major rules changes, minor rules.
No, I agree with you. I'm talking from my shop. From my hat tonight is from the shop's point of view, not from homebrew home game. Home game, you could do what you just said. My storm giant shrinks from A to Z. Everybody needs to make me reflex save. But unless the rules say that it can do that in 3.5 Pathfinder, which I mainly run, even 5th edition, you have to stay in your lane.
So now we do have another question. That's not the Storm Giant. Now, Mar, did you have anything to add on the Storm Giant combat?
Well, that's actually one of those things where handling it based on the way a particular game's rules work is vital because of what makes sense for how that particular game works. Because maybe it's a game where you can block attacks and just it hits you, but you take reduced damage from it. Or maybe your character has the ability to reflexively jump out of the way. I mean, it depends on what the game is.
The dragon depends on the age and of course the system, but most dragons have multiple attacks: bite, 2 claws, wing, tail, breath. I mean,
but the tail sweep attacks an arc.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make
everything in the arc.
Save.
So if a dragon's tail sweep attacks everything in the arc, so can a giant's great club.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I get where you're going with. This is hard for me to say. It truly is. But we live in a society that has rules, and we must follow said. God, I just can't do it. I'm sorry.
Yep, I know you can't. You're not lawful. You're not lawful enough for that. So the other question we do have is from L. This is a question. What is the biggest gimmick magic item anyone has ever used?
Can you give me a little bit more info on gimmick?
I'm not sure what you mean by gimmick either.
I mean, you can call the apparatus a Kowalsh. You could call the Lord Rodley Might.
I could use that one as well.
A wand of fireball.
That's less gimmicky.
Depends on who's using it.
Ring of Featherfall can be a gimmick because it's only used in very unique situations. One of my favorites is actually the Rod of Force. Something outlandish. Okay.
That's more case scenario
item.
I mean, some of the Hyperborea games I played had some really, really strange magic items in them.
I had the Coffin of Infinite Vampires. Is that gimmicky? Or is that just ridiculous?
Wow, that's just mean.
every time you close and open the door, a new vampire from some place would appear. And depending on random rolls, its disposition and attitude would become readily apparent. I
I hate
find
the deck of
this
many
is a
things so
ridiculous.
much.
It's
So
a
if you're
ridiculous.
lucky, you'll get a vampire that wants to be your friend.
The deck of many
It happens.
things is a double-edged sword. I don't have an idea for my campaign, so you do the gypsy fortune teller. Or it could be very much the end of the campaign. I'm done with you fuckers. Draw a card. I mean, it's
the
like
most
the bag of
gimmicky
beans.
thing. I think the most gimmicky thing I have used magic item wise is Dust of Dryness. Now, granted, I've said it on this channel. I've said it on other channels, and when it comes to my use of magic items, I try to find the most insane way to use magic items, especially the magic items that people overlook all the time. And Dust of Dryness is one of them. A lot of people are like, oh, why would I ever carry Dust of Dryness? Well, besides attacking water elementals, it can do a few things. It can hold water 100 gallons at a time. I'm using 3.0 rules, 3.5 rules. Holds 100 gallons of water. Great for portable storage, or great for carrying water without carrying the extra weight. I'm carrying 100 gallons of water, but I'm not carrying 800 pounds. I'm carrying a little pebble. Or, in my case, because I use it as a weapon, not necessarily to kill things. Maybe I might drown someone with it, but normally it's a defensive item to me because I will seek high ground, and anyone who's chasing me, I'm going to crush 5 or 6 of them at once to send 500 to 600 gallons of water rushing down at them on a hill because unless you're Hercules, you're not going to stand, in 500 to 600 gallons of water rushing at you. You're going to lose your footing, more than likely. So, I mean, that's how I use that kind of item. That's I think the biggest one that I use. That's the most common one.
I cursed a crowbar once.
Huh.
And instead of opening things, it just sealed them shut.
That's just
It was a curse item.
Oh well.
I mean, Dust of Dryness is fun.
Mac's on board with my idea.
Well, actually, I was in a campaign, I think, with you, where we kind of almost flooded a town with a water endless container of water. Yeah.
Surveillance water, yeah.
I've seen some people do some dumb shit with that.
I've literally never put Dust of Dryness in a single game ever.
Oh, oh my! It saved my ass with Bruce with dealing with the dragon. I got a couple pearls of fire. What are you going to do with it? I squish them, and the dragon drowns.
Yeah, no, I don't recommend allowing Dust of Dryness because of people like me.
But in one of the Hyperborea games I played, we had a anti-magic powder. Care to guess what that does?
Yeah, we had cold iron, and folks would try to slip it into magic users' drinks and that sort of thing. Again, just mean because they could potentially never be able to use magic ever again, depending on how you want.
See, this anti-magic powder, that was the entire purpose of it, was to block someone's ability to use magic.
I have a bar of iron. It just happens to be cold because it hasn't been anywhere near the smithy. I'm going to put in your drink. Baha! I can no longer use magic.
No, it wasn't.
No, it's two separate things. Like the cold iron powder, powdered cold iron would definitely affect something like a fae. You would know you're dealing with fae or maybe a demon if you give them holy water that has cold iron powder in it. Well, you're gonna know immediately. It'll break their disguise pretty quick.
The anti-magic powder,
anti-magic powder. Ow.
The anti-magic one, I agree. That would definitely shut down everybody. Well,
Thank you, Mar, for bringing that up because I might end up using that in a campaign at some point at like a
Oh,
feast.
Mark,
I might do that.
if you find
Thank you.
you get a package full of dog shit, you know what you've done.
Okay, well,
Wow.
that was one of those things that when it came up, it's like, okay, so most enemies are completely immune to this since they don't have the ability to use magic anyways. And oh wait, there's that enemy magic user over there.
That's like going through Pathfinder and go to Mana Waste. Hey, this is by anti-magic. I'm going to start coding my bullets in this shit and go up north to see what happens.
Mm.
Yeah, I would actually probably fill a hollow point with anti-magic powder.
Oh yeah, no. Thank you, Mark,
Why not?
for bringing new hell into my life.
Thank
Great.
you, Mar, for giving me an
I mean,
idea
the
to use
question
against my
was
players.
what are the like strangest things you've used in a game? Well,
Sure.
That's not strange. That's just mean.
Love it.
I mean, me saying, you know, strangest gimmick magic thing I use. Well, strangest thing is like me saying I have an outhouse that's really a mimic. That's just funny. But you bring in the powder, anti-magic powder. That's not funny. That's just mean. Which is now Jade approved.
I think the most gimmicky spell I've ever used, to continue the theme, the most gimmicky spell I used in D&D, at least 3.0, was Wall of Force. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, Wall of Force. You can't get through this. I just put it up and walk away, and you can't follow me for however long. Or it blocks all these things. Yeah, I didn't use it as a defensive mechanism. Never. I didn't even really. I used it as a bridge once. I used it to block things, sure, but my favorite thing I did with Wall of Force, because it's an immovable, like micro millimeter thick or nanometer thick wall of just pure force. My favorite thing I did with it was we were being attacked by a dragon, and I was running low on offensive magic spells. So I had Wall of Force prepared for the day as a wizard, because you never know when something like that might come in handy. I'm like, how big of a Wall of Force can I make? How big is is the space that it takes up, and how close is this dragon getting to the ground? Can I actually use this defensively? Well, wait, what if I turn it on ahead? How do I use this offensively? Because I have no way to attack the dragon. My friends are, getting waylaid by the flyby attack. Okay, how close is the dragon to the ground, Game Master? Oh, within 30 feet. Cool. So I'm going to make a Wall of Force. During it, I'm going to hold my action or ready in action that when it gets close to doing its flyby attack, and I might die, and I don't think I care because I'm going to down this dragon one way or another. I'm going to make a Wall of Force that stretches upward 50 feet. It can't be seen. It can't, it can't move. And I'm going to put it edgewise towards the dragon's wings. So the dragon flies by the dragon's flying at like 240 feet, does its breath weapon for a flyby attack. And I'm like, okay, so how much damage would it take from 1 nanometer or 1 micron thick of Wall of Force hitting its wing? And I was aiming for center of mass. The game master looked at it, and critically thought, it's like, that's probably enough to shear its wing off, like straight through bone and everything at 240 feet per 6 seconds. Like, that's probably strong enough to shear its wing off. So that's what he allowed to happen. My character died awfully, to fire. It was not great for my character. Everybody else dogpiled the dragon afterward. Good time.
I did have a hover a hover limousine of folding for a sci-fi game, so you could just put your limousine in your pocket. But yeah, most of my games, if they're fantasy, they're pretty standard D&D stuff like craftings, bag of devouring. Uh, you might run into one of those once, but chances are it would be a never. It's just never going to come up. Or things that were just really way out there, like the Coffin of Infinite Vampires and the Hover Limo of Folding. Um, that game, Jade, was really close to like a Dragon Star campaign. So it was sci-fi, fantasy, but lots
yeah,
of
yeah.
magic. I love those books. I
mean,
had a lot of fun with that.
I used a boat of folding a lot for some of my characters back in the day. Like one of my favorite character, the character I'm named my tavern after, used a boat of folding to get around most times. But the one time he got really pissed off, he was a improvised weapon master as well. Like he was famous for taking quite literally anything in one or two hands and using it as a weapon. And what the character did, I had nothing around me, and we were getting attacked. I can't remember by who, but I was like, okay, well, I have no weapons, and they are staying out of my reach. So I'm going to take my boat of folding. I'm going to turn it into a rowboat while I'm swinging. The game master's like, okay, sure. You say the command word as you swing the rowboat, and you connect with them with the rowboat. Awesome. And like, I don't know what kind of damage that does. And the game master's like, oh yeah, and just roll this. I'm like, cool. Now for because I get multiple attacks in my turn, I'm going to raise the boat up because I have the strength to actually hold this thing. I'm going to raise the boat up and I'm going to call for a long ship as I'm landing it on the guy.
When I hear folding boat, my mind goes to things that have a very thin frame covered with waterproof canvas, because there actually are things people have made in real life that are foldable boats. They're not particularly sturdy, but they don't have a particularly high capacity. But hey,
Right.
I don't know. You play a character long enough, you play in a campaign long enough, or play the same type of character. I'm of the fan. If you got a type of character you like to play, keep doing it until you can actually figure out the cream of the crop variation of them. Because your character is not going to work the same in everybody else's campaign. Therefore, you're not playing the same character. You're playing variations of the same character. Welcome to the multiverse in theory. Instead of going left, you went right with this guy. It's like Skyrim, and everybody's like, I'm going to be everything. No, everybody's just sneaky archers. I get it. I understand. I played the game too. But the boat, dusted dragon, weird arrows. It's not so much the gimmicks that you find in the campaign, it's the gimmicks that your players run with in the game that I find more interesting.
Yes and no. Having players think of cool ways to use things that are outside the norm for what it is. Like I like to reward creative thinking. So when a player does that, at first I'm gonna be like, what actual hell? But then when I really think about it, I'm like, you know what? That was a really inventive way of solving that. Good on them.
Well, one of the examples from one of my Hyperborea games was one of the least creative things I've ever seen anyone do in a TTRPG. However, it was something that was all about finding very, very effective ways of abusing a specific item that wasn't even technically magical. It was a napalm dispenser in a swords and sorcery adjacent TTRPG.
That's funny.
It's a device that would basically just fire globs of napalm at the enemy you're attacking, and that does it about as much damage as you think napalm would do.
1d6 plus 1 point of spreading damage.
No,
Well,
like 5.
probably make it 66.
I don't remember the exact.
Yeah.
One d six.
Directed, I would say it's probably 5d6.
I'm
You're
thinking
gonna be on
Alchemist.
fire.
I'm thinking Alchemist Fire from Pathfinder. It's
But-
1d6 plus 1 point of spreading damage.
No, L. It's not infinite. That was the point with this device. The thing with this device is it had limited ammo, and in order to get more ammo, you had to spend a lot of coin at the local chemist if you had a local chemist who was able to make ammo for you.
I like that idea. Jade put me through my paces when we were playing that war torn. Yes, you have gun, but you have to find gunpowder and materials to make it continue working. Giving a player just because is, in my opinion, is lazy DMing. If a player wants to do something and it takes resources, go make that player go find those resources.
Well, another limited use item we had was some sort of magic wand. I don't actually remember what it did, but we very rarely used it because the fact that we knew that we couldn't recharge the thing because of the fact that it was Hyperborean technology and you would need to find a Hyperborean to recharge it. Good luck with that one.
Sacrificing 13 children.
No. That's definitely not it.
It's Hyperborean. I mean, that sounds about right. Power to the core.
Well, we're talking about the sci-fi future tech side of things.
Oh, not the Conan the Barbarian.
But like it's a magic wand, has a bunch of symbols on it that you can't read because you don't speak Hyperborean. If you could read Hyperborean, they would probably tell you what it actually says about how many charges it has left. And you know that if you use it, it'll run out of charges eventually.
And Connell, when you mentioned, make your characters work for their materials, make them go find it. Like you even, went raiding the enemy supplies of gunpowder and lead because that was a means for you to gain what you needed to be able to be effective in combat. And I rewarded the party for that too. Not only were you disrupting the enemy's movements in the war game, you were also disrupting their supplies. Like you would take what you needed to make it another month on supplies, or 2 months, or whatever the case might be, if you had extra dimensional storage. But then you would set it up so you would blast it, like you would melt it down, blast it, or whatever, as you were leaving, so that the enemy could not use it. The enemy had, you wrecked their supplies on the way out, just to ensure that the enemies had to extend their supply lines because you were wrecking their crap. Which to me, like I reward that kind of play, that kind of thinking, especially in a war scenario where killing the enemy is one thing. Taking away their ability to wage war is vastly different, and to me that should be rewarded more.
I agree. I mean, how I started gaming to where I am now as a GM is two different creatures. I didn't, I've said this before. I got into the game much later than everybody else in this panel. Much later.
I just thought that.
And so I had to, play catch up. And now when I'm a DM, unless I'm running for kids, hey, well, pull out your map. There's such and such here, but this is where that is. Well, do you win or not? And so I blame you.
I just saw this comment from L. That's awesome. Dusted Rhinos as a topping for your enemy's cupcakes.
Oh, stomach cramps.
Would that kill you eating it?
Huh? Would it kill you? Not immediately. No. It would, because the Dusted Dryness, when it consumes 100 gallons of water, which we are not, it forms a pellet, like a small stone. But in the stomach acid, it would definitely take a lot of the water content away from your stomach acid. It would concentrate the acid.
So it would give you an intense burning pain in your abdomen, which would
kill your liver.
Worse as it ate a hole in your stomach lining, and then after it ate through your stomach lining and started mixing with your blood, it would start dehydrating your blood.
Oh yeah, it would
I
eventually
actually,
kill you, yes, but like
I
you would
see
have
it
to have a lot of it.
as I
Extremely
said,
painfully too, I would
I like
imagine.
that idea. Thank you,
I,
Al.
I
I
see
love
it
that
more
idea.
as jaundice. You just killed somebody's liver.
I love the concept.
Actually, I just thought of something.
I might use
If
that too.
I was to use that in a game, I would give the enemies eating them a reaction roll to see if they notice their saliva getting
Oh,
dehydrated when they taste it, thus giving them
Love
the
it.
option to spit it out.
that's just mean.
Love it.
That's not very Christmas to
So
me. Ooh. How?
this
Here's one
isn't a
for you.
Christmas stream.
Right. How about you give somebody a powder dessert, but the powder is actually really tiny knives, like ninja throwing stores.
This is not asking
Actually,
Ninja.
we have that in real life, Connell.
I mean,
It's called diatomaceous earth. It's basically a bunch of silicate fragments that are
Yep.
sharp and pointy. That are, well, they're the shells of these microscopic.
well, the reason why I made that comment is just to make Jade laugh because, well,
Yeah.
ask a ninja.
Just ask a Ninja.
But I mean,
Yeah.
to most people though, they're not harmful because of the fact that the skin on the inside of your throat is just too thick for them to actually hurt you.
Anyway, we are at the 2-hour mark. And I want to say thank you to you, the audience, for watching our content week by week. I really do appreciate it. You are the reason why we make this content. You're the reason why we're here week to week. Publishing our thoughts and our concepts on how we do things, why we do, and your questions. They deserve answers. So any questions that you have, even going into the new year, if you want us to talk about a game that we may have played that you want to know the rules to, want to know how to play a game, we'll explore that. And keep asking us questions. Keep asking us, how would you do this, or why would a game master, or in this game, my game master did this, and I don't understand why. Can someone explain it to me? Keep asking those questions, and we'll keep trying to come up with content to not necessarily just entertain you, but to also maybe generate ideas for you, maybe generate or spawn or invigorate your own imagination to pursue a path that you may not have thought of otherwise.
I mean, if you want to just ask me questions about how to work Star Trek lore into games, hey, go for it. I like that too.
No kidding.
So,
Commies in Space RPG.
I do want, like I said, I want to thank everyone for who has watched, who will watch in the future, and thank you to all of you who keep coming back. This has been a great 2023 for this channel, and yeah, I look forward to 2024.
Ditto.
With that, does anybody have any final comments for the evening?
Go forth. Have a good New Year's Eve. If you can find a group to game with, that's even better. Be safe. Don't do anything that Conall would do. Granted, that doesn't leave much, but all the same, be safe.
No, L, that would not be my answer. And Mac, I'm not doing either of those things. But cheers, Mac. Thanks again, buddy. Still waiting for that list.
Ooh. I wonder what Sarah's doing.
So, thank you for joining us this evening on an Ask Us Anything episode, and hopefully, next year we'll get some really great questions from you, the audience, in our Discord. If you haven't already done so, please consider joining our Discord, where you can pose questions to us, in our general discussion or our suggestion box. We'd love to hear from you. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to this channel and the other channels that will be linked in the video description below after you go. If you liked tonight's content, please consider hitting that like button, as it lets us know that we're doing a great job and we're giving you things to think about. Have a good night, everyone.